Good morning. Until the age of 7, I lived on Secret Lake Road in Avon, Connecticut. The street was named clearly before GPS and Google Maps because at that point you could keep a lake a secret. However, the lake was no secret to me, and I was either in the lake swimming or on the lake skating at every possible moment. From the age of 2, I would run into the water, and without really being able to swim, I would sink, and my mom would pull me up and shake me upside down to get the water out of my lungs. But I would run right back in as soon as she put me down. I remember very clearly having the double-bladed skates, I'm sure some of you do as well, when I first started out skating. And it was such a thrill when the lake froze for the first time in the winter. So from a very early age, my mother decided to put me in swimming and figure skating lessons. When I was 10 years old, I joined the summer swim team, and because of my young age, the competition was co-ed. My first race was the 25-yard freestyle, and I will never forget the rush of hitting the water off the blocks, swimming as fast as I could, and smacking the wall with my hand at the other end of the pool, and immediately looking to my right and looking to my left to quickly discover that it was my hand that had made contact with the wall first. I had come in first place and had beaten the boys in the race, which was such an incredible thrill. I was hooked on swimming. I swam every summer after that up until college and was on the Kingswood swim team from the 7th through the 12th grade. There I am in action. When I was in the 5th grade, a neighborhood soccer team began, and I jumped at the chance to learn and play a new sport. As a 7th grader in the Kingswood Middle School, they had us play both soccer and field hockey in the fall and tennis and lacrosse in the spring. In the 8th grade, they made you pick between the two sports, and while I loved both field hockey and soccer, more girls were opting to play soccer. And so I knew I would be able to play more if I chose field hockey, so that is what I did. For me, all I wanted to do was play, and play as much as I could. Little embarrassing middle school photo. For every season of my 6 years at Kingswood, I played field hockey, I swam and I dove, and I played lacrosse. When I began to apply to college, I don't even remember thinking about it deliberately. I just knew I would continue to play sports in college. I met with a couple of coaches in the process, but recruiting for women's athletic teams at the time was not widespread and really only occurred in a few sports and at the highest levels. I was offered no advice on the process by my college counselor or coaches. I just knew I wanted to play. I showed up at Georgetown, got in contact with the field hockey coach, and reported for practice on the first day of preseason. I played both field hockey and lacrosse for Coach Landis, and I even tried out for the swim team, but I didn't feel connected to that coach or the team and decided not to swim. At that time, you could still play 2 Division I sports. Me and many of my teammates did. My field hockey team, my lacrosse team, notice the plaid kilts, super stylish. And there I am on the left, sort of in action, waiting for the draw. My experience playing college athletics was greatly impacted by the actions of a woman who is not well known to history despite what she accomplished. Bernice Sandler was in elementary school in the 1930s and 1940s and was upset by the fact that her teachers always asked the boys in the class to do the most important tasks, like, can you believe this, running the slide projector. One day after school, she told her mom how much this bothered her and that one day she would change it. Fast forward to 1969, when she was teaching part-time at the University of Maryland and applied for a full-time position. There were 7 open positions, and she was not offered even one. When she spoke to a friend on the faculty, she couldn't understand why she was not offered one of the positions, and he told her that her qualifications were excellent. She spoke out too much for a woman. After being rejected from 2 more jobs and being told, quote, that she was just a housewife who went back to school, she decided to act. Bernice Sandler wrote, quote, I began to think about the ramifications of discrimination and the burgeoning women's movement and to explore how the law treated sex discrimination. Knowing that sex discrimination was immoral, I assumed it would also be illegal. However, before 1972, it was not illegal in education, and discrimination was pervasive in the academic world. Women were denied jobs, denied admission to programs, and denied scholarships. She began to research what she could do to protect women from gender discrimination, and she discovered that President Johnson had amended an executive order in 1968 which barred federal contractors from discriminating on the basis of race, color, religion, and national origin to also now include sex. Since most colleges and universities have federal contracts, the executive order would apply to them, which meant they could not discriminate on the basis of sex. She began to work with the Women's Equity Action League in the early 1970s, and they filed class action lawsuits against all colleges and universities alleging sex discrimination. That got the attention of Congress, and specifically Representatives Martha Griffiths of Michigan, Edith Green of Oregon, and Patsy Mink of Hawaii, who was the first woman of color elected to Congress. They were all very knowledgeable and interested in solving the problems of sex discrimination in higher education. They drafted the legislation that would forever change education in America. Richard Nixon signed into law the 1972 Education Amendments, in which Title IX is included, and states, "No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program and activity receiving federal financial assistance." Title IX applies to all educational institutions receiving federal financial assistance from kindergarten through graduate school. It addresses 10 key areas of education, but it is most known for its impact on athletics. When the Supreme Court ruled that racial discrimination was unconstitutional in Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, schools did not want to desegregate. Similarly, 20 years later, many schools did not want to or know how to comply with Title IX. The first example of a women's college athletic team demanding their rights was the 1976 Yale women's rowing team. Mr. Piacenza was also at Yale at this time. The men's and women's team rode the bus together to the boathouse, which was built originally only for a men's team. There was a small restroom where the women could use the toilet, but there was no locker room or showers for the women. They had to wait on the bus, cold and wet, for the men to shower and change into warm clothes to be able to return back to campus. Remember, they rode throughout the entire school year, including in the winter and very cold spring days. They had to take the bus that took 15 to 20 minutes for the boys to shower, and the trip back to campus took another 30 minutes. They did not have time to shower or change before dinner, so they had to eat quickly, again, still cold and wet. Yale made a couple of attempts to solve the problem, but nothing came to fruition, and the women's team grew increasingly frustrated. Team captain Chris Ernst wanted to get the attention of the school. She thought, what better way to get the attention than to strip naked in front of the director of women's intercollegiate sports and demand their rights under Title IX. 19 members of the women's team wrote Title IX on their backs in Yale blue ink and walked into the director's office. They brought a photographer and a reporter who wrote for both the Yale Daily News and the New York Times. They stripped down and turned around to expose their Title IX message on their backs. The captain explained that she expected fair and equal treatment by Yale, which they were entitled to under federal law. The story was published in the New York Times and in papers around the world. The following season, the Yale boathouse was renovated to accommodate women. Fast forward to 1991 and the spring of my junior year at Georgetown. The athletic department decided that they wanted to raise the profile of the men's lacrosse team in the hopes of creating a competitive Big East men's lacrosse league. They hired a very successful and well-known coach at the time, and they fully outfitted the men's team with everything they could possibly need in terms of equipment. They had 4 full-time coaches and were given the prime afternoon slot to practice on the turf. My team had 2 part-time coaches. We were given no equipment, and as you'll be able to see in this photo coming up, we were issued jackets that were meant to be worn by both the women's field hockey and lacrosse teams. Me and my two of my teammates, you can see the jacket, and there's sort of up close, Georgetown hockey and lacrosse. They were too cheap to produce jackets for each individual sport. Because we had to share turf with the men's team, and because they were given the afternoon slot to practice, we had to practice either early in the morning or early in the evening under the lights. One corner of the field remained dark as a significant number of bulbs were burned out and had not been replaced. The gym was also not open for us at that time of day, so we had no access to a locker room or the training room. We were told to go to the Georgetown University Hospital if we got hurt at practice. My friend and teammate Martha's mother was an athletic director at a public school in New Jersey. When Martha relayed our situation to her mother, her mom let Martha know that Georgetown was clearly in violation of Title IX and suggested we do something about it. Martha and I decided to write a letter to the athletic director asking him for a locker room, reasonable practice times, and access to trainers, all of which we were entitled to under Title IX. I will never forget the practice where our head coach came out to the field crying and pulled our assistant to the side and told us to warm up on our own. 20 minutes later, she called us in and explained, despite having coached at Georgetown for 5 seasons, that she had never met the athletic director until that day when he pulled her into his office and screamed at her. He told her how ridiculous he thought it was that she could not control her team and that her players had gone behind her back. This could not have been further from the truth. We knew that she was trying to get the situation remedied, but the school needed to know that we meant business and that players were willing to take Georgetown to court to get our rights. We did not have to go to court. Georgetown did the right thing and began to treat the women's team equally. Our coach began to more actively recruit and was able to give out scholarships. 6 years after I graduated, the women's team made the NCAA tournament for the first time, and 2 years after that, they were runner-up in the NCAA finals. It has been a nationally ranked program ever since. There's my teammate and one of my best friends, Martha, and me at our Georgetown graduation. I chose to become a teacher and a coach because of the teachers and coaches that I had at Kingswood, and because of the experiences I had on the teams I played on in high school and college. I love playing. I love having fun. I love being part of a team. There's nothing else like that experience. As a coach and athletic director, I have watched students give up on playing sports for a variety of reasons. Students often quit when they don't make the varsity team, thinking there's just no point in playing JV or thirds. As we all know, specialization is real, and the pressures athletes face are tremendous, much more so than when I was playing. However, you have to ask yourself, why do you feel the need to specialize and give up on playing a sport that you also enjoy? My most vivid memories of high school and college are not my team's wins and losses. It was the bus rides. It was the skits we did on our spring break trip. It was hanging out on the bleachers in between races and swim meets. The best friends I have ever made are my teammates. I texted my teammate Martha about this talk, and she immediately responded, and we started chatting as if no time had passed at all. If you quit, if you choose not to play, you cannot develop these relationships and have these lasting memories. And those memories and relationships develop and last no matter what level team you play on. One of my former lacrosse players who played JV lacrosse for me in her lower mid-year earned 11 varsity letters at Taft and went on to play lacrosse at Cornell. She told me the most fun team she ever played on was the JV lacrosse team. It is easy to take for granted your ability to play a sport at Taft. But what I want you to know is many people who have come before you have had to fight for that right. While you are young and while you have the opportunity, I encourage you to play on as many teams as you can. Consider continuing your playing career into college. You may have a better chance at it than you think. Talk to your coach about it. You can also join intramural programs in college and club teams as an adult. Keep in mind that playing on a Taft team might be your last chance to be a part of a team. Becoming a coach is also a great way to remain involved in athletics. Other than having children and being married to Mr. Hawes, I know this is a surprise, but being a coach has brought me the most joy in my life. It feels pretty good to be doused with water after winning a championship. And while I no longer compete in field hockey and lacrosse, I do still swim and compete occasionally. The best part of my job as an athletic director is I get to watch you play for Taft. It brings me great joy to see all of the athletes doing what they love and, most importantly, having fun while doing it. Thank you very much and have a good day.